You know, Ray Berry had bad eyes, he had a short leg, he was slow, but he was probably the most intense and hardest working man in the NFL.
He was a homemade football player. He made himself into a football player on total drive, on intensity, on a desire to make it. Raymond had gone to SMU, and Colts, when they drafted him, thought of him as a defensive end. Imagine Raymond Berry, 182 pounds, as a defensive end.
Raymond Berry came to the Colts without an abundance of ability, yet went on to become, with the cooperation of the game's greatest quarterback, one of the finest receivers in the history of pro football. As a pair, Unitas to Berry were to the Colts what Gable was to Lombard in the movies, and what Jagger is to Richards in the Rolling Stones. The source of Berry's success was lodged in dedication, hard work, and an obsession with detail that bordered on the fanatic.
When he went on the road, he insisted on taking his own private scale with him because he was fearful that the scales in California and in Chicago wouldn't give him an honest reading. And he always wanted to play at 182 pounds. He didn't want to play at 183. So he knew that if he carried his own scale with him, that he would get an accurate reading. So he carried his own scale.
Ray Berry was an eccentric, and there was madness to his method. But it helped him become a three-time All-Pro and drove him to the Hall of Fame. His achievements were a triumph for a common man, a fact not lost on his teammates.
The longer he stayed around and the unbelievable catches that he started to make, the football players, the old clique and the old heads and the established veterans suddenly started to accept him because they found out he could play.
I think the one guy Raymond would want to punch would have been me, because I used to use his hairbrush all the time. The comb was there, and then his towel, and he had his back brace hanging up that he'd washed, and his underwear, and I used to go and use the hairbrush and turn it around the other way so he knew I'd use it. And he'd come up to me, look at me. He'd say, "Arthur, I wish you wouldn't use my hair." I said, "Raymond, I'll never do it again." Do the same thing the next day. So then he got to the point that if I didn't do it, he'd be looking forward for me using his hairbrush.
He was a slave to routine and incessant practice. This ensured his accomplishments, but it also made it harder for him to tolerate failure.
And I didn't like to drop a ball. It really irritated me.
He'd practice hour after hour diving into a net under the goal post, and he once said that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, and I must be prepared to make my own luck.
Practice makes perfect, and Ray Berry became the perfect receiver.
It gradually began to become clear that there are a certain number of types of catches. The short ball, there's about 12, and on the long ball, there's about 6. And so basically that became the drill, that just constantly working on those 18 basically type of catches over and over and over. 2, 3, 4 of each type every day, catching 7,500 balls a day.
Berry orchestrated every step in practice until it became pure reflex in a game. He was like an Arthur Murray dance student who enters a klutz and graduates in a stare. He didn't smoke, didn't drink, and like the cowboy who never shot first, he played a clean game on the field and off it.
I know of no whitey that was ever regarded with the reverence of a Raymond Berry. He's a kind of an individual that, you know, all of us that know locker room language, we've been in the service and we use all the 4-letter words that were ever invented. When Raymond came around, most of the players cleaned up their vocabulary out of respect to Raymond Berry. It was almost like he was a member of the clergy.
In 1958, pro football became a religion. Television brought to the masses what was called the greatest game ever played, as the Colts defeated the Giants in sudden death for the NFL championship. When pro football moved to center stage, the game became the centerpiece in the magnificent career of Raymond Berry. When he left pro football, he left it as a remarkable player and a remarkable man.
He was yards apart from any other athlete that you'd ever want to meet. Just a tremendous credit to humanity, and it makes you pleased to know that in your lifetime you've had an opportunity to know a man like Raymond Berry, who has has given most all of the good qualities that God wants man to have, and very few of its weaknesses.